The summer heat shimmered across the endless Montana prairie as Willow Matthews stood on the freshly built porch of her small homestead, clutching her mother's Bible to her chest, as if it were the last anchor to a life that no longer existed. Her mother's funeral had been yesterday a sparse affair with only the local preacher and a handful of neighbors who barely knew the woman who had raised Willow alone since she was 5. The weight of solitude pressed upon her shoulders like the vast sky above. Willow's fingers traced the worn leather binding of the Bible, its pages yellowed with age and spotted with tear stains from generations of Matthews women who had turned to its pages for comfort. But Willow found no comfort there. Not anymore. Not since her mother's cough had turned to blood and the doctor from Helena had shaken his head solemnly. "What good are promises of eternal life when I'm left alone in this world?" she whispered to the empty plains stretching before her. At 22, Willow faced the daunting prospect of managing their small ranch alone or abandoning it altogether. Neither option seemed bearable. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the horizon. A lone rider approached, his silhouette dark against the golden sunset. As he drew closer, Willow recognized the broad shoulders and distinctive hat of Xavier Eastwood, owner of the neighboring ranch that dwarfed her family's modest holdings. At 30, Xavier had already established himself as one of the most successful cattle ranchers in the territory. His reputation for fair dealings with both settlers and the indigenous Blackfoot tribes had earned him respect throughout the region. Willow had exchanged pleasantries with him at town gatherings, but they had never spoken at length. "Evening, Miss Matthews," Xavier called as he approached, removing his hat respectfully. The dying sun caught in his dark hair, revealing strands of copper that Willow had never noticed before. "I wanted to pay my respects. Your mother was a fine woman." "Thank you, Mr. Eastwood." Willow clutched the Bible tighter, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. She hadn't bothered with her hair that morning, and her dress was wrinkled from sitting vigil by her mother's empty bed the night before. Xavier dismounted with fluid grace, tying his chestnut mare to the porch post. "I also wanted to check on you. Living alone out here isn't easy for anyone, let alone a young woman." Willow lifted her chin. "I'm perfectly capable, Mr. Eastwood." A smile touched his lips, softening the weathered lines of his face. "I've no doubt of that, Miss Matthews. But capability doesn't preclude neighborliness." He glanced at the Bible in her hands, and Willow felt an inexplicable shame. She'd been considering riding into town tomorrow to give it to the church. "What use did she have for faith now?" "My mother's," she said simply, following his gaze. "I thought I might donate it to Reverend Thompson's congregation." Something shifted in Xavier's expression. "That's a generous thought," he said carefully, "though family heirlooms are precious things." "It's just gathering dust here," Willow replied, more defensively than she'd intended. Xavier nodded, not pressing the matter. "I've brought some provisions, thought you might not have had time for town with." He trailed off delicately, only then did Willow notice the bulging saddlebags on his horse. "That's very kind but unnecessary," she said, even as her stomach reminded her that the pantry was nearly bare. Pride was a poor substitute for flour and coffee. "Consider it a debt repaid," Xavier said. "Your mother once helped my younger sister when she was caught in that blizzard 3 winters back. Saved her life, bringing her in from the cold," Willow remembered. Her mother had stayed up all night, nursing the half-frozen girl until the storm broke and Xavier could make it through the drifts to collect her. "Please," he added when she hesitated. Relenting, Willow stepped aside to allow him to bring the provisions inside. The small cabin was neat but stark, lacking the feminine touches that her mother had always maintained. Willow had been too consumed with caring for her during the illness to bother with such things. Xavier moved with surprising delicacy for such a large man, arranging the supplies on her kitchen table without comment on the barren state of her home. Coffee, flour, sugar, salt pork, beans, and unexpectedly a jar of peach preserves. "The preserves are from Mrs. Holloway in town," he explained when he caught her eyeing them. "She sends her condolences." Something about this small kindness, this acknowledgement of her mother's passing from a woman she barely knew, broke through Willow's carefully maintained composure. Tears sprang to her eyes and she turned away quickly, mortified. "Forgive me," she whispered, clutching the Bible like a shield. "There's nothing to forgive," Xavier said quietly, keeping a respectful distance. "Grief has its own time." His understanding only made the tears flow faster. "I don't know what I'm going to do," Willow admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "The ranch needs attention I can't give alone, but it's all I have left of my parents." Xavier was silent for a long moment. "What if you had help?" Willow turned to face him, wiping her eyes with her free hand. "Help? I could send one of my men over daily to assist with the heavier work. No strings attached," he added quickly. "Just neighborly support until you decide what's best." Suspicion flickered within her. Men didn't offer something for nothing in this territory. "Why would you do that?" Xavier's eyes, a deep green that reminded her of the forest beyond the creek, met hers steadily. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I know what it's like to feel alone in this vastness." There was a story there, Willow realized. Something in his voice spoke of personal experience with loss. "I appreciate the offer," she said carefully, "but I couldn't accept charity indefinitely." "Then until harvest," he suggested. "By then, you'll have had time to grieve properly and make decisions with a clearer mind." The practicality of his suggestion was undeniable. Her mother's illness had consumed Willow's attention during the spring planting, and the small vegetable garden was pitiful compared to previous years. Without help, she might not have enough to last through winter. "Until harvest," she agreed reluctantly. "But I'll pay fair wages when I sell my mother's quilts in town." Xavier nodded, respecting her pride. "I'll send Jacob by tomorrow morning. He's young but reliable." After he left, Willow stood in the doorway watching his figure recede into the gathering darkness. The Bible was still clutched in her hands, and she looked down at it with mixed emotions. Perhaps she would wait before giving it away. True to his word, Xavier sent Jacob the next morning. The boy, barely 18 but strong and eager to prove himself, worked diligently to repair the chicken coop and mend the corral fence. Willow found herself grateful for his cheerful presence, which alleviated some of the oppressive silence that had settled over the homestead. Throughout the following weeks, Xavier himself appeared regularly to check on progress and bring additional supplies. Willow initially maintained a polite distance, but gradually found herself looking forward to his visits. He never stayed long, but their conversations grew less formal, touching on books they'd read, memories of their childhoods, and the changing seasons. One evening in late July, as thunderclouds gathered on the horizon, Xavier arrived with an urgency in his manner that immediately put Willow on alert. "River's rising fast," he explained without preamble. "Storm's been dumping water upstream for days. You need to move your livestock to higher ground." Together, they worked in the fading light to lead her small herd of cattle and horses to the slope behind the cabin. Rain began to fall as they secured the last nervous mare, soaking them both to the skin. "You should stay here tonight," Willow said as lightning cracked across the sky. "It's not safe to ride back in this." Xavier hesitated, clearly concerned about propriety, but another flash of lightning decided the matter. "Thank you." Inside, Willow lit the lamps and stoked the fire while Xavier removed his sodden coat. The small cabin suddenly felt even smaller with his presence filling it. Willow became acutely aware of her appearance, her drenched dress clinging to her frame, her hair escaping its pins in wild tendrils. "I'll make coffee," she said, needing occupation for her hands. Xavier sat at her kitchen table, running a hand through his wet hair. "Your quick action saved your livestock," he commented. "Many ranchers lose half their herds to flash floods like this." "I had help," Willow reminded him, setting the coffee pot on the stove. Their eyes met across the room, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of how naturally they had worked together, anticipating each other's movements as if they'd done so for years. Willow broke the moment first, turning to retrieve cups from the shelf. Her mother's Bible sat nearby, and Xavier's gaze fell upon it. "You decided to keep it," he observed. "For now," Willow replied. though I still question its comfort." Xavier was silent for a moment. "Faith isn't just about comfort," he finally said. "Sometimes it's about finding meaning in suffering." "Have you," Willow asked, surprised by his philosophical turn, "found meaning?" A shadow crossed his face. "Not always, but I try." He ran a finger along the Bible's spine. "May I?" When she nodded, he opened it carefully, revealing the family record inked on the frontispiece: births, marriages, and deaths meticulously recorded in different hands across generations. "This is more than faith," Xavier said softly. "It's your history." Willow brought the coffee to the table and sat across from him. "A history of women left alone," she observed, pointing to the entries. "My grandmother lost her husband in the Mexican War, my mother was widowed when I was 5, and now I'm alone before ever being anyone's wife." "A history of strong women who endured," Xavier countered, his finger tracing the dates. "Look how your grandmother raised 4 children alone, how your mother traveled west with just you for company." Willow had never considered it from that perspective. "I suppose that's one way to see it." Outside, the storm raged on, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling through the eaves. Inside, a different kind of storm was brewing in Willow's heart: confusion about her growing feelings for this man who had entered her life when she was at her most vulnerable. "Why are you really helping me, Xavier?" she asked suddenly, using his given name for the first time. He looked up from the Bible, surprise evident in his expression, followed by something warmer. "Because from the first time I saw you in town last year, reading to those children outside the general store, I couldn't look away." His honesty startled her. "You never spoke to me then. You were caring for your mother. It wasn't the right time." He closed the Bible gently. "And perhaps it still isn't, but I couldn't stay away when I heard of your loss." Willow studied him across the table, this man who managed vast lands and dozens of workers, yet moved with gentle consideration in her small world. "I'm not looking for a husband to rescue me," she said finally. Xavier smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "I would expect nothing less from a Matthews woman, but perhaps in time you might consider a partner instead." The storm lasted through the night, with Xavier sleeping in the chair while Willow took her bed. By morning, the creek had indeed overflowed its banks, but her livestock remained safe on higher ground. They worked side by side to assess the damage, which was mercifully minimal. As summer progressed into early autumn, Willow found her grief gradually transforming. It didn't disappear, but it settled into a more manageable ache, one that allowed room for other emotions. With Xavier's help, both direct and through his workers, the ranch slowly revived. The vegetable garden flourished, chickens multiplied, and the small hay field yielded a respectable harvest. Xavier's visits became a regular feature of Willow's life. Sometimes they worked together, sometimes they simply talked. He brought books from his substantial library, introducing her to authors she'd never encountered. She shared her mother's recipes, discovering a surprising enjoyment in watching this powerful rancher savor her simple cooking. On a golden afternoon in late September, Xavier arrived with an unexpected invitation. "There's a harvest dance in town tomorrow evening," he said as they walked along the creek, checking for any remaining flood damage. "Would you consider attending with me?" Willow hadn't been to a social event since before her mother's illness. The thought of facing the townspeople's curiosity and pity made her hesitate. "I'm not sure I'm ready for so many people." "We could leave early if it becomes too much," Xavier offered, "but it might be good to remember there's still joy to be found in community." Something in his gentle encouragement reminded her of her mother, who had always insisted on celebrating even small victories during hard times. Perhaps it was time to honor that spirit. "I'll need to press my best dress," Willow said, which wasn't exactly acceptance but wasn't refusal either. Xavier's smile was worth the anxiety the decision provoked. "I'll come by at 4 tomorrow." That evening, Willow opened her mother's trunk, searching for the blue dress she'd worn to last year's Christmas gathering. Beneath folded clothing, her fingers brushed cool metal. Pulling it out, she discovered her mother's silver hairbrush and hand mirror, wrapped carefully in soft cloth. A small note in her mother's handwriting read, "For Willow when she's ready to see her own beauty again. Tears sprang to her eyes. Even in death, her mother had found ways to care for her. Clutching the mirror, Willow caught her reflection thinner than before, with shadows beneath her eyes, but with a new resilience in her expression that hadn't been there months ago. When Xavier arrived the following afternoon, punctual as always, he paused at the sight of her. Willow had arranged her hair in loose waves, secured with her mother's pearl combs, and the blue dress emphasized the color of her eyes. "You look beautiful," Xavier said simply, the admiration in his gaze making her cheeks warm. The harvest dance was held in the newly constructed town hall, decorated with autumn leaves and pumpkins. Lanterns cast a golden glow over the gathered settlers, farmers, and ranchers who formed the community of Promise Creek. As Xavier had predicted, there were curious glances and sympathetic nods when they entered, but most people simply welcomed Willow back to town life with genuine warmth. "Miss Matthews, how wonderful to see you," Mrs. Holloway greeted her. "Your mother's spirit shines in your face tonight." The elderly woman's sincerity touched Willow. "Thank you for the peach preserves," she responded. "They brought comfort on difficult days." "That's what community does, dear," Mrs. Holloway patted her hand. "We carry each other through." As the local fiddler struck up a lively tune, Xavier turned to Willow. "May I have this dance?" Despite her initial nervousness, Willow found herself enjoying the evening more than she'd anticipated. Xavier proved to be a skilled dancer, guiding her confidently through both spirited reels and gentler waltzes. During a break in the music, he brought her a cup of punch and led her outside for some air. The town square was peaceful under the stars, with only a few couples strolling along the wooden sidewalks. In the distance, the church steeple rose against the night sky, reminding Willow of her earlier intention to donate her mother's Bible. "I've been thinking," she said, her breath forming small clouds in the cooling autumn air, "about what you said regarding my mother's Bible, about it being more than faith but history." Xavier leaned against the porch railing, giving her his full attention. "And I still don't know if I believe as she did," Willow admitted. "But I understand now why she held on to it through all her hardships. It connected her to something larger than herself, both family and faith." "That's a powerful realization," Xavier said softly. Willow nodded, watching candlelight flicker through the town hall windows. "I've decided not to give it away after all." Something like relief crossed Xavier's face. "I'm glad. Some treasures are meant to be passed forward, not given away." The way he looked at her made Willow wonder if he was speaking of more than just the Bible. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had named, but both recognized a deep connection that went beyond neighborly support or even friendship. As winter approached, Xavier's presence at Willow's homestead became even more frequent. He helped prepare the ranch for the harsh Montana winter, ensuring her woodpile was substantial and her roof secure against snow. They often shared meals, sometimes with Jacob or other ranch hands joining them, creating a sense of extended family that eased Willow's loneliness. The first snowfall came early that year, blanketing the prairie in pristine white. Xavier arrived with a sled attached to his horse, his face alight with boyish enthusiasm. "I thought we might visit the ridge," he suggested. "The view of the valley in fresh snow is something to behold." Bundled in her warmest clothes, Willow agreed to the adventure. The journey to the ridge was exhilarating, with Xavier's strong arms around her as he guided the sled through drifts. When they reached the summit, Willow caught her breath at the panorama below, endless white rolling to the horizon, broken only by dark smudges of distant forests and the silver ribbon of the frozen creek. "It's magnificent," she whispered, her voice carried away by the crisp wind. Xavier stood close beside her, his breath warm against her cheek. "This is why I could never leave this land despite its hardships. This vastness speaks to something inside me." Willow understood perfectly. For all its dangers and isolation, the Montana Territory had a raw beauty that captured the soul. "Willow," Xavier said, turning to face her fully, "I've respected your need for time and independence these past months, but I can't keep my feelings unspoken any longer." Her heart quickened as his gloved hands gently took hers. "I love you," he said simply. "Your strength, your kindness, the way you face each day's challenges with grace. I don't want to rescue you, you've proven you don't need rescuing, but I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Snow began falling again, delicate flakes catching in Willow's eyelashes as she looked up at him. All her carefully constructed defenses built to protect herself from further loss seemed suddenly fragile against the sincerity in his eyes. "I've been afraid," she admitted. "Afraid to care for someone again when I know how easily people can be taken away." Xavier nodded, understanding in his expression. "Fear is the price we pay for love, but is a life without love truly living?" The question hung between them, crystallizing in the frosty air like the snowflakes around them. In that moment, Willow thought of her mother's Bible of generations of Matthews women who had faced loss yet chosen to love again, to build families, to move forward while carrying their grief as part of them, not all of them. "I love you too," she whispered, the words forming clouds between them. "And yes, I want to build that life with you." Xavier's smile rivaled the brilliance of the snow-covered landscape as he drew her into his arms. Their kiss was warm against the winter chill, a promise of the hearth they would create together. Their wedding took place on Christmas Eve in the Promise Creek Church, with snowdrifts piled high outside and pine boughs decorating the simple interior. Willow carried wildflowers Xavier had somehow procured from a greenhouse in Helena, along with sprigs of evergreen that symbolized enduring love. Her mother's Bible rested on a small table near the altar, a tangible connection to the family that had come before. Mrs. Holloway had helped Willow alter her mother's wedding dress, ivory satin that complemented her fair skin and dark hair. When Xavier saw her walking down the aisle, the reverence in his expression told her everything she needed to know about his love. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with Reverend Thompson speaking eloquently about new beginnings and the courage it takes to open one's heart after loss. When they exchanged vows, Xavier's voice remained steady while Willow's trembled with emotion. "I promise to honor your independence even as we join our lives," Xavier added to the traditional words. "Your strength is what drew me to you, and I will nurture it always." Afterward, the entire community gathered at the town hall for a celebration that lasted well into the night. Dancing, feasting, and laughter filled the space as Promise Creek embraced the union of two of its most respected citizens. In the quiet of their first night together at Xavier's ranch house, now their shared home, Willow experienced a peace she hadn't felt since before her mother's illness. The house was larger than her cabin but still modest by some standards, filled with books and quality furnishings that spoke of Xavier's success without ostentation. "Welcome home, Mrs. Eastwood," he whispered as he carried her across the threshold. The weeks and months that followed were a time of adjustment and discovery as they learned to blend their separate lives into one shared existence. Xavier's ranch hands treated Willow with respect, quickly recognizing her knowledge of livestock and land management. She brought her mother's recipes and feminine touch to the house, transforming it from a functional bachelor's residence to a true home. Spring came early that year, bringing with it the news that Willow was expecting their first child. Xavier's joy was boundless as he lifted her in his arms, spinning her in circles until she laughingly reminded him of her condition. "A baby," he repeated in wonder, placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our child." As her pregnancy progressed through summer, Willow often found herself thinking of her mother, wishing she could ask questions, share experiences, seek advice. One hot August afternoon, feeling particularly emotional, she retrieved her mother's Bible from the shelf where it had been carefully placed upon their marriage. Opening it to the family record, she traced the entries with her finger, just as Xavier had done that stormy night nearly a year before. Then she reached for a pen and carefully added 2 new lines, her marriage to Xavier Eastwood, and beneath it, a space for their coming child. Xavier found her there, seated by the window with the Bible open on her lap, her expression pensive. "What are you thinking about, love?" he asked, settling beside her. Willow gestured to the family record, About legacy, about what we pass down to our children beyond property or possessions. Xavier studied the pages with her. Faith, courage, the strength to endure hardship without losing hope. Yes, Willow agreed, though I still struggle sometimes with faith. Faith comes in many forms, Xavier said thoughtfully. Faith in God and each other in the future, you have the latter too in abundance. Willow leaned against him, finding comfort in his solid presence. I was considering giving this to Reverend Thompson again, she admitted. Since I don't read it as my mother did. Xavier was silent for a moment, his hand covering hers on the worn leather binding. Or, he suggested gently, you could read it to our children instead. The simplicity of his suggestion struck her with unexpected force. Not as a religious mandate, but as a connection, a way to link the child growing within her to the generations who had come before. A way to honor her mother's memory while creating new traditions for their family. Read it to our children, she repeated softly, seeing the wisdom in his words. Yes, I think I will. Their daughter arrived with the first snow of winter, a robust, vocal baby girl with Xavier's green eyes and Willow's determined chin. They named her Elizabeth Honor Eastwood after both their mothers. On a quiet evening when Elizabeth was 6 weeks old, Willow sat in the rocking chair by the fire, the infant cradled in one arm, her mother's Bible open in her free hand. Xavier entered quietly, pausing in the doorway to watch his wife and daughter in the firelight. She's too young to understand, of course, Willow said without looking up, aware of his presence nonetheless. But I thought I'd start a tradition early. Xavier crossed the room to kneel beside them, gently stroking his daughter's downy head. What are you reading to her? Love is patient, love is kind, Willow quoted. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Appropriate, Xavier murmured, watching their daughter's peaceful face. What made you choose that passage? Willow smiled, meeting his gaze. It was bookmarked with a pressed wildflower. I think it might have been read at my parents' wedding. As she continued reading softly, Xavier settled on the floor beside them, his head resting against her knee. In that moment, surrounded by the family she had created and connected to the family she had lost, Willow understood what her mother had known all along, that faith, love, and family were intertwined in ways that transcended simple belief, creating a tapestry of connection that neither distance nor death could sever. Years later, when Elizabeth was joined by 2 brothers, the tradition continued. The Matthews family Bible became not just a record of births, marriages, and deaths, but a living connection between generations. Willow never became as conventionally religious as her mother had been, but she found her own kind of faith in the land that sustained them, in the community that surrounded them, in the family she and Xavier built together, and in love that had found her when she least expected it. And sometimes, in the quiet of night when the children were asleep, Willow would open the Bible to that same passage about love's endurance, running her fingers over the dried wildflower her mother had placed there long ago, and whisper a thank you to the woman who had inadvertently given her the greatest gift of all, the courage to open her heart again.